Hi, English 132 students. I'm back, and we're going to be talking about doing research for your research paper. Um, First of all, I have on my blue board here the library. People talk about going to the library. What do they mean by that? Usually they mean the public library. Every city and town in America has a library, or if it's a big enough city, a library system with a main branch or a main library and then branches. Usually, when people say they're going to the library, that's what they mean. But it's worth noting that there are also what they call academic libraries, which are libraries that are attached to colleges, parts of colleges. And um, it's not just another library, it's a library with a different collection. Um, Librarians who work in public libraries are they collect books. The librarians are the ones who select the books that go into the collection, and they collect books that the general public would want. They're books that people get just for fun, leisure. They're books that have to do with, sort of practical things like how to build a shed or how to do your taxes, or um, you know, books about vacationing in Washington, D.C., or things like that. Um, um, all kinds of things that, a typical citizen or household might need. Academic libraries, college libraries, don't bother with a lot of that stuff. They instead build a collection that's targeted for college students, and specifically for college students on their campus. So often college librarians know what specific instructors are teaching, and they buy books that support that. So, in fact, in our college's library, there are a couple of dozen books that I've ordered for them, for you, because they have to do with the topics that are on the assignment sheet for your research paper. Things about Wikipedia and multitasking, conspiracy theories, happiness, memory, that kind of thing. So it's worth keeping in mind that if you try to do your research in a public library for this class or for other college classes, it probably won't work very well. In fact, if you try to do your research at any library right now, it wouldn't work very well because they're all closed. Which brings me to my next thing. There is something called see this new trick I learned, just raising the board till you see the next line here. The National Emergency Library. This group that has been scanning in books and archiving them, storing the information for years, has decided to put together an emergency library for college students to do their research during the pandemic, because they can't get their hands, college students can't get their hands on physical books. Here is the website, the web address, archive.org/NEL, National Emergency Library. You should copy that down because this is the key to finding books for your project. I think this is going to be the key for finding books for your project. Now, you might say, this is a discussion we had earlier, you might say, well, we don't need to have books because all information is on the internet, which, as I said before, is not true. You might think that all information is on the internet, and you think, well, I want to find something out about conspiracy theories, I can find it on the internet. True, you can find some information on nearly any topic on the internet, but you can't always find the best information or high quality information. People who write books are usually experts, and they take a lot of time to put down what they know on paper, and they take a year or two to write a book, and then they want to be paid for it. So what they've written, which is usually the highest quality information on a subject, um, is not available on the internet. It's intentionally kept off of the internet so that they can sell it in book form. If somebody were to put it on the internet, um, that person would get in trouble. So libraries are still important because they hold a lot of the most important information on topics. And remember earlier when I talked about the assignment sheet that I gave you, the assignment sheet specifies that you need to have at least one of each of the three main kinds of sources that people consider essential to research. One being, I'm just waving the assignment sheet at you. One essential kind of source would be the internet, of course. Everybody knows that when you want to do research, the internet is useful. Number two would be books, and number three would be periodicals. Right? Well, yeah, so you have to have at least one of each of those sources. And with the pandemic happening, the library is closed. Our library is closed. But the librarians are still there. You can call and talk to them, and they're still the research experts who can help you do your research paper, but you won't be able to get your hands on the actual books that I've ordered for the library for you. Since we are not in a classroom, I've had to kind of improvise here, and I want to show you something about getting your hands on books here. So I'm going to use an iPad. I can't find the library's homepage linked on the college's website. It must be there somewhere, but I have never seen it. I just type in HFC Library, Henry Ford College Library, something like that, or Eshelman Library, that's the name of the library. Anyway, it brings up the homepage, which is library.hfcc.edu. So here's what their homepage looks like. We've looked at this before. One thing you might notice is under the Find heading, the list of things that says Find, there's something called Course Reserves. I have put on reserve several books that are relevant to each of the topics. So you can either search by instructor or by course. It doesn't matter. If you don't remember how to spell my name or you don't know who I am, type in English 132. Hey, 132, and then submit search. And you'll see, there's English 132 in the first line. There are 5 instructors who have books for English 132. And there's my name, right? Reitz, John. Touch that, and you get a list of about 15 books that I've put on reserve. What that means is they are not books that you could have taken out of the library. They are behind the circulation desk, and you can borrow them to use in the library. But now, of course, you can't do that either. I'm drawing your attention to this because here are, more than a dozen books, as I said, several on each of the topics that I know are potentially useful for your papers. So whichever topic from the topic sheet you choose, you can look here and find at least one book that should be helpful for you, right? And then what do you do? Since you can't get your hands on the actual books, you can go to the National Emergency Library. Let's take a quick look at that. What did I say it was? Archive.org. slash NEL. Ta-da, there it is, National Emergency Library. Right? And what this does is it allows you to, how can they do this? When I just said that if somebody puts a copyrighted book on the internet, they'll be sued for copyright infringement. Well, I've read about it. What they're doing is your public library might also loan out an electronic copy of a book, like for a Kindle or something like that. But they will buy the book, the library will, and then they will only allow one person at a time to get access to it. Well, that's the model that this emergency library is using as well. If you're the first one to get there, you can be loaned that book. One thing this means is that I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's going to be important for you not to hog the book. You know, borrow it and then use it for a couple hours and put it back. You know, quote unquote, put it back. Return it to the library so that someone else can use it. The thinking is that if they're only loaning out one, letting one person at a time look at it, then it is kind of the same as having bought a a hard copy and loaning it out to people one at a time. So that's what's going on. I hope that emergency library works for you. Let me know if it does or if it doesn't. If you think to communicate with me about it, I'd be glad to know. All right. So books. How do you find something in a book? Well, I should point out that, these 200 or 300 page books, I'm not expecting that you'd get them and you'd read them cover to cover. That's not how research works. If you're interested in the topic and you want to read the whole book, fine. But when people are doing research, they usually try to locate just the parts of the book that are going to be relevant to the work that they're doing. So at the beginning and the end of a book, typically there are guides for you. In the front of the book, you'll see the table of contents. You can see what the different chapters are about. At the back of the book, there's often an index, and you can look through there to find which pages in the book are about your specific topic. If it's a book about conspiracy theories, maybe you'd look for, under C for causes, or P for psychological theories, or something like that. And it'll work the same way with the electronic books from the emergency library, because of course those are just scans of the actual physical copies, the hard copies. All right. So searching the internet, that's a different lecture, different discussion that we'll do tomorrow, probably tomorrow. Books we just talked about, and then of course periodicals, the third kind of source. Books are excellent sources for kind of taking the big picture on a topic. They are typically hundreds of pages long, and they can go into a lot of details, pulling information from a lot of different places, showing it how it all fits together. The internet is excellent for having unlimited space to put information up, and also for things to be put up instantly and to be revised, and so it has its advantages. Periodicals have their advantages as well, and periodicals include newspapers, you know what that is, a magazine, or as they're sometimes called, popular magazines, meaning not just they have a lot of people who subscribe, but that they're aiming for the general population, right, for the ordinary people. And then there's the third category, academic journals. sometimes just called journals, but they're referred to as academic journals because they are specifically written for academic purposes. Right? People read Sports Illustrated or the New York Times or Time Magazine or something like that just because they want to, right? It's leisure reading. Academic journals, and there are also professional journals, are periodicals on a specific academic topic or professional profession. Like there are ones for lawyers, legal journals. There are medical journals for doctors. Different academic journals would be different academic disciplines like sociology or literature or economics, that kind of thing. There are journals in every field, and what they include is, of course, all three of these periodicals have articles in them. News articles in the newspapers. Those are articles about current events. Magazines, they can be articles about anything. They can be news, they can be about any subject. Academic journals, you get usually like 10 to 20 page essays, articles about some very specific kind of obscure aspect of economics or architecture or business or whatever, French literature. And the key here is that these are written, I'm going to write it down, it's so important. Written by experts, for experts. I'm surprised at how many of the phrases I want to write fit exactly in the space that I have. They're written by experts for experts. And that's important because we talked about this back before our eternal spring break that we're still on. Who is it that knows best about a particular topic? If you're talking about, cancer research, or what do you suppose the people who are trying to get a handle on the pandemic, the doctors and epidemiologists and so forth who are trying to get a handle on the pandemic, how are they exchanging information? They're not just looking at Facebook to see what people are saying. They go to the journals to get the most recent information, or from, of course, websites where they're sharing information. But they're not generally talking to the general public. They're talking to other experts, and so something that's written by experts for experts is typically the highest quality information. It's also challenging to use because it's written at a very high level and assumes that you're also an expert. So they're sometimes hard to use, but they're worth using when you can. They bring more credibility to your paper because they're stronger sources. We talked before about peer review. Things get published in a newspaper because they have journalists who are on their staff, and they assign them to go and cover the auto show or the bridge that collapsed or whatever. Same thing with popular magazines. They typically have their staff of writers, and they assign topics to them. And these writers are experts about writing, but they're not necessarily experts about the subject that they're writing about. With journals, the people who are writing journal articles often are not very good writers. They're just uh, they're good researchers and they're clever in their field, um, um, but um, they're the people who are actually doing the research. They write up their research, and um, the articles published in journals are generally what they call peer reviewed. They have a journal will have a panel of 3 readers who are experts in that field, and they will read the articles that are submitted to the periodical, and they'll make a judgment um, about whether it should be published or not, or whether it should be revised or not. And they have 3 readers because if you had 2, you'd have lots of ties. One would vote yes and one would vote no. 3, you can't have a tie. Either it's going to be 3-0 or 2-1, and it will be either yes publish or no publish. So, it's not that complicated of a system, but it's a really important system because what it means is that everything you see published in a journal was reviewed and approved by other experts in that field, and it's a way of ensuring higher quality information, and it is a very big deal. It's basically what modern science was built on. In the last video, I talked about how scientists are hoping to bit by bit get little bits of understanding, little facts, little pieces of information about how the world works and piece it all together so that we have a complete understanding. Peer-reviewed articles, peer-reviewed research is the basis of that. That's the way that information is checked, so it's not just accepted because somebody said it, but that it's has a high probability of being solid information. All right. So what else do I have to tell you about journals? I think that's all I need to tell you about that, except how you find them, right? Open up my iPad again, go back to the Eshelman Library. I showed you how to find books that are on reserve in the library. If you want to find books in general in the library, of course, there's the catalog, right? And you search the catalog by typing in either a keyword or a title or an author or a subject, and it'll bring up books, on that subject. Let's do a keyword. Which one do we want to do? Happiness. Look at that. We have 187 sources here, books on happiness. And wow, there's a new book there that I didn't know about. Let's see if I can find one that is on reserve. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter because the library is closed. But you can see that you find, a ton of books that are about happiness. Not all of these are going to be helpful for the kind of research you're doing. You want something that's, if you look at the assignment sheet, it says, what have researchers discovered about what makes people happy, not just sort of gurus and what do you call those books? Self-help books. how to be happy in 13 days or whatever. All right. So I'm bringing this up because you're probably very familiar with finding books in the library, and what you're using, what we call the card catalog or the library catalog, is what we call a database. And um, we've discussed that a little bit before. A database is a collection of information. It's collected and put together by somebody or a group of somebodies. Um, they're collecting information that's all on the same narrow topic and compiling it kind of into a little box, right? The internet, for example, is not a database because the internet is just a big random bulletin board that anybody can post anything on. But a database would be something like um, what the Secretary of State would have. They would have everyone's driver's license information and their voting information, and they wouldn't mix the two up, and they wouldn't, in the Secretary of State's office, you're not going to be able to find out whether your dog needs to take flea medicine or anything like that. That's at your veterinarians database, right? And etc. Right? Databases are not just information that's collected, but also organized in a way so that it can be searched. As any library acquires new books, they enter the title and the author and the subject and keyword and all that into their database so that it can be found. Because without the catalog, how would you find any books on a subject that you wanted? All right. But then, if we're talking about periodicals, the world of periodicals is not organized like books. When you're going for a periodical, you're not usually going to look for a specific periodical, but an article within the periodical, right? You know that there are things written out there, articles written out there about Wikipedia and multitasking, but how do you find them? You don't just start looking through how many periodicals does our library subscribe to? Thousands, right? Thousands. You couldn't possibly start looking through them. They need to be indexed somehow, right? So that's what the other database of the day is that we're going to look at on the library's homepage. There it is again. Next to the classic catalog, you'll see magnifying glass that says research databases. That's how you find articles on a particular subject, right? When you get to this page of research databases, you can see that the library has a lot of them, right? A lot of databases. You can think of each one of those as a big box of information. The one that's going to be most interesting and helpful for you is going to be InfoTrack Gale. So, whoops. So open up that one. Here it comes. Come on. There it is. InfoTrack Gale. And as you can see, InfoTrack Gale is itself a list of smaller databases. So it's like a big database that includes a bunch of smaller databases, but by smaller, these are not small. Each of these has hundreds and thousands of periodicals and articles in it. So this is really probably the only one you'll need, right? And you can either go into a specific periodical or you can search up here. This search box allows you to search through all of the periodicals for a particular subject. I think that the first two, if you just select those first two, the Gale Academic One file and the Gale General One file. Academic One file, those are periodicals that lean towards the towards academic, right? Towards journal articles. The the Gale General one file, those are more newspapers and popular magazines, but there's some overlap between them. But if you choose those two and do a search on something, you'll get, let's say, let's do happiness again. Let's do conspiracism. Conspiracism. And if you remember from our discussion, conspiracism is it's a belief system. It's a kind of a habitual belief that things are controlled from behind the scenes by, in secret by some powerful people. Because your paper, if you choose to do conspiracy theories, is not to write about the actual conspiracy theories, but to write about conspiracism, to write about the mindset of people who believe in conspiracy theories. So here we go. We have 75 magazine articles. You can see here, 72 magazine articles. And you can see that there also are, up here, you could choose academic journals. There are 55 articles, 4 books, 140 news articles, and 1 video. You can sort them by relevance, or you can put the newest one at the top, or you can put the oldest one at the top. Maybe relevance is the best, huh? Okay. This is an article about millennial conspiracism. It's about conspiracy beliefs among the under 30 crowd or the under 40 crowd. Confounder-in-chief, the Donald Trump era requires a new theory of conspiracy theories. All right, so you can see there's lots of articles here about conspiracy theories and conspiracism. What do you do when you find this? Well, this is from Washington Monthly. If we click on it, we can see that there it is. We get the whole article. Sometimes you don't have a whole article, you just have sort of the mention that the article exists because our library doesn't subscribe to that periodical. Most often, though, you do get what they call full text articles, right? And let's see if we can find another one. Another one that, here's one. This is from Commonweal magazine, and it says, citation only. That means we're not going to get the article. We're just going to be told that the article exists, right? There it is. There's the information in case you wanted to go find the article, but the article is not subscribed to by our library, right? So that happens. You can sort for full text documents only. It's over here, right? There it is. Now we only have full text articles, and it'll eliminate anything that the library doesn't actually own. Let's say that we like this one about Donald Trump, and we want to use that one. Well, what do we do with it once we've brought it up here? Well, you can do several things. You can send it to yourself in an email. You can download it to your computer. You can print it. You can get the link. There are different ways, in other words, that you can acquire the articles once you've located them, right? You don't have to look them up every time. You can kind of get them in your pocket. All right. Anything else I need to tell you here about that? We may be done for today at 35 minutes. If there's anything else I need to tell you about either books or periodicals and databases, I'll tell you that at the beginning of the next video, which is going to be shorter and it'll be about internet research. All right, bye.